Hello and welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where we discuss all things men's health and testosterone. I'm Dr. Max, lead clinician at Alphagenix, and today I'm joined by Sandy Christiansen from EXSEED Health. Sandy is a clinical embryologist and fertility coach. Welcome, Sandy.
Thank you so much, Max. Thank you for having me today.
Pleasure. So tell us about yourself, Sandy. How did you get into being a clinical embryologist and working with EXSEED Health? What was your background in terms of getting into this space?
Yeah, so I started off studying biomedical sciences in Sweden, where I lived at the time, and very luckily applied for a job at a fertility clinic, which I got, and I worked there for 4 years. So was a fully trained embryologist, and really enjoyed the work, loved the interaction with patients, but obviously loved the outcomes that we could help give people. After a couple of years there, I made a move to London, where I worked in both NHS and private clinics, and became an HCPC registered clinical scientist and completed a European certification as well. But about 4 years ago, I left that industry and started my own business, offering a bit more fertility support for those who are going through treatments and need a bit more help navigating the space. And at that time, I also encountered EXSEED and joined them and their team to be able to help provide affordable and accessible fertility testing to them.
Nice. What was the sort of inspiration behind going into this area? Have you always been interested in fertility? Was it something that you saw, because we'll probably touch upon the declining fertility rates across the globe. But was it something that you saw behind the science, or was it just a personal interest in the area?
A bit of both. I have to say, my kind of first encounters with fertility treatments was actually growing up on a farm, where my grandmother was breeding horses. So
Fair enough.
Encountered artificial insemination of thoroughbreds when I was about 5 or 6 years old. My veterinarian pulled up a canister of horse semen from a liquid nitrogen container and let it thaw out on the bonnet of his car. So that was my first encounter.
Yeah. So that's the way in, isn't it?
That's the way in. It is. I think that had always not the maybe animal aspect, although I think first stage I always kind of loved the idea of becoming a veterinarian, but I kind of pivoted and ended up in fertility instead.
Yeah. I mean, it is. I mean, I've known a lot of farmers through where I grew up in the West Midlands, and it's been done for a long time in that space, hasn't it? The artificial insemination and all of those practices. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can tell you it has happened on many occasions when I'm trying to research different types of treatments that instead I get up insemination, like bovine insemination papers on the medical publication websites instead of humans. Oh, yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So when in your background, has it always been about, because obviously EXSEED deal with, I believe, just men's fertility, men's sperm sampling and things. Has your background been a mixed picture of men and women, or has it always been more leaning towards the male space?
It's definitely been a mixed picture. So I think prior to joining the EXSEED team, when I've been working with my own clients, for example, the majority of my clients have been female, and there are possibly different reasons for that, but along with the kind of emotional aspect when trying to conceive, in my experience, women have tended to need a little bit more additional support. So I've had more of a female focus before joining the EXSEED team, and I think it's helped me as well in how I speak to my clients, and especially when I'm speaking to couples, addressing both of them, because it's a two-person equation, isn't it, and trying to form families. So it's been very eye-opening.
Yeah, it can certainly be stressful, can't it? I mean, it's particularly if it doesn't happen like as quickly as one would expect, and I think I've been through this, and I think a lot of my guys have been through this, and like you said, it is a two-person operation in a sense. So but it can put strain on relationships. It can put strain on the individuals going through it as well. Do you find that women's fertility is more complicated than men's? Is that fair to say? Because I always say, being in the male hormone space and working with female hormones as well in a different clinic I work with, Atlas Labs, I always say to the team is that I find women's hormones more difficult to interpret than men's hormones, because our system's almost, in my opinion anyway, a little bit more simple. Is the female fertility side more complicated, do you think, or is it maybe not right speaking to a specialist like yourself? Maybe you find it quite fairly simple, whereas
no. I think fertility in general is complex. I think there are possibly more, I don't want to say that male fertility is simple, and I don't want that to be for men to associate their difficulties with something being simple, but I feel that there are possibly more factors that can affect a woman being the person who would then go on to carry a baby, because it's not just the hormonal aspect, there's the uterine environment as well, the eggs at ovulation, and then the implantation, and actually the capability of carrying a child to full term. So I think there are possibly more factors involved in that. And when we're looking at men, we have hormone levels and sperm production, which is not simple, but I think there might be more things that get investigated for the women.
Yeah, I think it's more, it's got multiple layers that need to work in, or at least work in conjunction as well. Yeah. Whereas with the men, by simple, I meant that it is purely looking at the testicular function, the sperm production, the sperm quality, and then that's kind of almost like that's the job, and then that's kind of done. Whereas there's a lot more for the women's side of things to do. And like you said, the investigations are maybe a bit more complicated. Yeah.
I think the reason I try to avoid simple is because I think very often women, when couples end up in treatment or going to see doctors, or are kind of in that process, a lot of the time men are told, well, you have the easy bit, right? You just go in there and produce a sperm sample, like it's the rest that's the hard stuff. And I wouldn't want anybody to feel that way, because it's all hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, simple's maybe the wrong word. Yeah, it's got less layers of investigation needed or functioning needed. Yeah. So with the EXSEED side of things, maybe tell us what EXSEED do and what they offer, because we were talking offline before, and I've used the EXSEED kit and I found it really handy, because when I was diagnosed with testicular cancer about 8-9 years ago, I had to, before any treatment started, fortunately I didn't need chemo, but before the operation, I remember having to go to a fertility clinic and do a sample, in the closet, with nurses, everybody walking around in the corridor, noises going and everything like that. Conversations literally outside the door, and I was like, this isn't a romantic environment. And then, obviously when Alphagenix teamed with EXSEED, I saw the kit and I was like, oh, this is useful. So recently on my own fertility journey, I've used a kit, and I must say it was much more of a easygoing experience, and actually very useful information given up. But yeah, maybe tell us a little bit about what EXSEED does and how it can be used potentially, and then we'll maybe touch upon where it has a role with TRT particularly.
Yeah, definitely. So EXSEED have developed an amazing home sperm test kit, which essentially comprises of a little device that helps turn your phone into a microscope. So you get to produce a sample into a semen container at home from the comfort of your own home. You let it liquefy. You've got a timer on the app so that it will ding when it's ready. You take a droplet of the sample and place it on a small glass that feeds into the device. So it's like a microscope slide essentially, and then your app reads the results of it. So uses a really very nifty AI or a computer computer generated semen analysis. It's what the device helps do. So analyzes the sample for you. So with that, you get to see the video of your sperm. You can see them moving on your screen, and it generates a report. And the report will include things like the sperm count, the concentration, so how many there are, and the motility, which is how they're moving. In addition to that, the report will say, you know, are you within the current reference values of what's considered normal sperm health, or are the results suboptimal? If you take that one step further, the report will then turn into kind of a lifestyle profile where it can show you ways to optimize and possibly improve your sperm health through different lifestyle and nutritional changes. So
Yeah.
that not only does it give you like a report with your results, but it can also provide guidance on how to improve that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what was so impressive about it, was the fact that you actually got a kind of a detailed analysis of the sperm.
Yeah.
And then actually it went into, and you could click on the links and you could go into lifestyle, nutrition, exercise, supplementation, all the stress, everything like that, which, you know, is right in my wheelhouse, because frankly speaking to people listening, the same things that improve sperm count and sperm quality are exactly the same things that improve testosterone and how people feel in general. I mean, overall health, basically. But the same series of things is what I advise to guys who don't go on TRT, but who need to or want to improve their natural levels of testosterone. It's exactly the same sort of stuff that it can improve fertility as well. Obviously, logically, because it's, you know, 95% of your testosterone is produced in your testicles, and that's your sperm manufacturing site as well. So it makes sense that getting those healthier is going to help both sides of things.
Exactly. No, it is. And it's also like, much to your point of having to go into the clinic and hearing people around, it's like being able to access that from the comfort of your own home and having instant results is such a benefit. And there have been some studies that show that samples produced in clinics are actually lower quality than those produced at home, which, when you think about it, doesn't quite make sense, because it takes, you know, roughly 3 months to produce new sperm. However, they think that there are other factors that are involved with the, I guess, the physical production that might restrict part of the ejaculation, or you know, getting a full and complete sample in an on-site location as opposed to doing it from the comfort of your own home. So I found that quite fascinating.
Do you think is that linked to, you know, we talk about the effects of stress on our bodies. Is that acute physiological stress response that maybe a lot of guys are having when they are basically in a foreign environment? The pressure's on to go into the cupboard and produce a sample, you know, and it's almost that psychological then impacts you physically. Is that what they suspect? Have they sort of formulated ideas as to maybe why that is?
Yeah, quite possibly, yes. That was the theory. It's just one of those things that's slightly harder to prove.
Yeah.
But that was, yeah, I think anxiety mixed with you know, muscular tension, and a slight, yeah, a physiological response, basically kind of restricting um the release that you
Yes.
might have
Yeah. Like,
in a different circumstance.
yes, yeah, pelvic muscles all tightening and things like that, and restricting volumes, and yes, yeah, yeah. Without
Yeah.
going into too much detail, perhaps, yeah. So what about why, you know? So before we touch on the TRT link,
Mhm.
what about the global state of affairs when it comes to, obviously we're talking about men here, male fertility, because obviously, you know, female fertility is also seems to be more, let's put it this way, more women are having fertility issues than once before, but certainly it seems sperm counts are on the wane. Has that been pretty much sewed up now that we know that levels are declining?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And there are a lot of factors that contribute to this, and a lot of them that are not within our control. Obviously, I'm sure as you are aware and have you guide and help your patients, there is a lot that we can do to help improve and optimize our fertility. But there are certain things that are slightly beyond our control. And one of the biggest factors there that we know has an impact on sperm health is pollutants, right? So environmental factors. Some can be within our own control, but if you think of air pollutants, depending on where you live, what's around you, we're thinking exhaust from cars, we're thinking fertilizers in the air. So it's kind of whether you're in the city or you're more in the countryside, there are still things around you that can have an impact, and it's not entirely avoidable. But yes, I would say fertility in general is we've seen a trend that it is declining. For men in particular, it's a bit easier to measure that in the quality of the sperm. As we said before, female fertility has kind of quite a few different variables, so it's not as easy to measure up against, for example, a sperm count, where we can see a general decline in the general population.
Yeah, and I suppose it's easier as well with men because, although maybe sperm does go down a little bit as men get older, there's not so much of the biology related to the aging process as well. So you're able to take samples at different ages of men and show that by this age the fertility is declining. In 25-year-olds it's declined by X amount, but in 30-year-olds it's declined by X amount. So it's like you said, it's a bit easier to get the data, I suppose, and there's less interference in terms of factors outside of just sampling a sperm, for example. I saw a statistic that since 2000 the annual decrease has been over 2% in sperm concentration, I believe it was. It's quite alarming, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit of a drastic kind of wake up call, isn't it? And again, sorry.
I was just going to say, you mentioned environmental factors. I like to use and it's exactly the same with testosterone production. There's a colleague of mine who works. He's an Australian men's health coach, and he says when he likes things in threes, he says plastics, pollution, pesticides. It's quite easy to remember alliteration, I guess. But yeah, certainly to a degree, I suppose there is things that you can do to reduce your exposure in terms of the food you eat and where you venture to. But what about the adjustable, more lifestyle related stuff? What's the sort of stuff that you tend to go into and the app goes into regarding lifestyle for men, just for those guys who are listening thinking, how do I improve my fertility?
Of course. Well, I mean, you did actually mention something important there as well, which is plastic. So I think one of the things that, as coaches, we try to do is just say, try to replace your plastic Tupperware with glass or something, or like find other ways of storing your food. Try not to heat up plastic in the microwave. Those are the kind of like in your house immediate things that you can do, because plastics and microplastics are also things that we know can contribute to a decline in fertility. So that is one thing. In general, when we're talking about like diet and lifestyle, nutrition is really important. There are a lot of people who say that the Mediterranean diet is really good for fertility because it incorporates everything, really. It's very well balanced. So you have meat and fish, but also your fruits and your vegetables. So fruits are really important for sperm health because they're rich in antioxidants, which can protect against reactive oxygen species. This is what can cause higher levels of DNA fragmentation in sperm, and it can cause a decrease in morphology, for example. So they are sperm superfoods. Dark leafy greens are full of iron and folate, which is also good for sperm production. Nuts are really good sources of selenium, particularly Brazil nuts. So that's really important in the production of sperm. Omega-3s, so your fatty acids found in fish and some vegetables as well, super, super important for sperm health. So those are all things that you may want to try to incorporate in your diet and your nutritional intake, but of course supplementation can also be really beneficial. Supplements will never replace a healthy diet, but you definitely have that kind of option of incorporating them just to ensure that you're getting the right amounts of each thing. That exercise is really important. Sedentary lifestyle is linked with a decline in fertility. It doesn't mean that you need to go run marathons, but it is good for your testosterone levels and then subsequently also your sperm health. And then I guess all of the, healthy and unhealthy habits, right? So no smoking, no vaping. Those are the two biggest things that, and recreational drugs, but biggest things that
Mhm.
we know are linked to decrease in both testosterone production and sperm production. Chemicals in cigarette smoke can damage the DNA integrity in sperm as well, which can have an impact on fertility, so implantation rates, but also miscarriage rates. So those are really important factors. Excessive alcohol consumption is also linked with a decline in fertility. I think caffeine is something that is recommended to be, kept to a maybe 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day. So all of these kind of day-to-day things that you do, in your daily, lifestyle can have an
Mm.
impact. And when we try to think about our habits and maybe replace some unhealthy habits with healthy habits, it can have a really big impact on your sperm health.
Yeah. So is it about sort of providing the building blocks to make sperm? So through the diet and nutritional aspects of it, is the mainstay of, lifestyle adjustments, is it to reduce this dreaded oxidative stress? Is that the mainstay of or is that too simplistic to look at it? Because you mentioned about free radicals.
Mhm.
Obviously some of those micronutrients you touched upon
Mm.
largely are sort of either antioxidant or directly affect, reducing oxidative stress in your testicles.
Mhm.
Is that kind of the main? I often say for guys in terms of testosterone, it's almost about reducing inflammation, and a big factor with testosterone is excessive fat levels. So whether, primarily visceral fat, so the fat around organs, and I believe there's a correlation there with fertility as well in men. Is that right as well, in terms of higher body fat percentages tend to lead to not only reductions in testosterone, but reductions in fertility? Same system again, like we said. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Same system. And it is indeed. I think what's important to remember that fats are the building blocks of our hormones. We need fats. We just need to think of the healthy fats and so reducing deep fried foods, for example, where
Mhm.
the fats are not good for you, and looking at incorporating more healthy fats that are found in things like olive oil and oily fish and avocados and nuts and things like that. So there's, I think, reducing oxidative stress is one part of it. I'm not sure it's the main thing, much to your point, reducing inflammation, but also ensuring that you've got those right building blocks for the sperm production as well, because it's important for the count and the motility, and also then the morphology and the DNA integrity of sperm as well.
Yeah. So you can improve through multiple lifestyle measures, which, you
Absolutely.
know, they're not. It's almost what your grandmother told you to do, in terms of it's the simple stuff makes a big difference. So, and it's simple in terms of, like you said, you can explain it in a few minutes there, but actually implementing that can sometimes come with some fairly big habit changes, I suppose, and
Yeah,
planning.
it takes planning, it takes time, and I think one of the things that can be quite discouraging for people who are trying to implement these changes is because it takes so long. And, with sperm production, because that whole process can take roughly 3 months, if you are monitoring your sperm health and you're retesting, you might get discouraged if you're not seeing the results quickly enough, because you feel like you've been putting all these changes in place and it's, what do you have to show for it? But it, on the whole, some of these changes will be very beneficial for your fertility and your overall health, and they are important things to do. And yeah, I think, like you said, like what your grandmother told you to do, I think it's also important to note that the nutritional value in foods today probably is a lot lower than what it was 50 years ago. Certainly, something along those lines that we talked about offline earlier is that
Mhm.
um, there's a decline in the nutrition that we get too. So sometimes we need to increase our intake compared to what our grandparents used to do. So that's also something to be mindful of. It's probably harder for us to stay healthy today than it was for them.
Yeah, yeah, and that's where that sort of Mediterranean, or even I like things like the paleo diet in terms of prioritizing whole foods. Potentially, do you even consider things like organic food? Because we've talked about the environmental factors. Is maybe reducing pesticide exposure food wise, is that going to be
Absolutely.
useful as well? Yeah,
Definitely, yes. But I think it's so easy to over obsess about these things. It's like you
yeah,
want to go organic, but you also want to go local because you don't want it to be shipped too far because that contributes to the air pollution as well. And it's like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
really hard to fulfill all of those things. And so I, the same way you want your diet to be balanced, you kind of want the source of your food to be balanced as well. Organic
mhm,
when and where you can, replace your kind of really harsh chemicals inside with bit more for you know I was going to say fertility friendly, but yeah, fertility friendly um, cleaning products. Those that are also eco friendly or environmentally friendly tend to go a little bit more hand in hand. um, it's it is a hard thing to do, and no one's saying that you need to go out to your kitchen cupboard and just like chuck everything and replace it right away, but small changes when and where you can and where affordable can make a difference as well.
yeah. I recently did a bit of a search and tried to find some online farms to order from. So local, not necessarily local, but
Yeah.
um, national farms that are organic and they deliver to your house. And I ended up accidentally basically ordering from 3 places at once. And so a couple of days ago, I had like 5 boxes of food. And I was like, she said to my wife, right, for the next few days, we're going to have a lot of vegetable soup and smoothies because I've just ordered the world's worth of vegetables and fruit
Yeah.
mistakenly because I thought I'd timed the deliveries appropriately to try different places, just to see what's their produce like, what's it wrapped in, because I think that's always, maybe significant as well, avoiding plastics if you can. Yeah.
Again, yeah, absolutely, yes, and I think we're starting to see that in some supermarkets as well, and they're reducing the packaging on some of their fruits and vegetables. A lot of them are then also encouraging you to buy little like mesh tote bags to like
Yeah.
take your produce away in, which is fine. Again, better than the plastics. But for us, it's kind of hard. Like I'm not in a big city, but our farmers market is here like once every 2 weeks. And as lovely as the produce is, towards the end of those 2 weeks, you can't buy food for a month. It's not going to last
Mhm.
that long. So then it becomes oh, is it wasteful then? So
Yeah, it's
again,
that
it's all
balance.
about trying to find a bit of a balance. It's hard. It is hard.
The other
Yeah.
balance to it as well is, and I always talk about the 3 S's: sleep, stress, and sort of satiety, almost in senses. In terms of sometimes what you see in my world of working, sort of the health optimization space, is that it can almost become an obsessive pursuit. Like you said, you can spend your whole day trying to do things and buy things and use things to make yourself either feel better or, for example, in this case, improve your fertility. But the other end of the spectrum is obviously when it comes to your male hormones and things, is reducing or managing stress is quite important. So the opposite end of the scale is, here's some lifestyle changes you can incorporate that we know can improve sperm and fertility, but on the other end of it, don't spend your day and night stressing over it. Does that make sense? You see what I'm sort of
No, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it does. And I think that's really, again, that's just a difficult space to be. It's like wanting to make these improvements, but also try not to get overly obsessed with it because that will stress me out, and then stress might have an impact on my sperm production. It
yeah,
just becomes
yeah,
that negative loop.
yeah.
And we know that, when you're experiencing kind of fertility problems or possibly even like on journey trying to find support for low testosterone, we know that that in itself is stressful and it's not something that you can just switch on or off, right? So
Yeah.
saying like, oh, don't worry or don't stress about it isn't very helpful, but just understanding that, try to find those coping mechanisms that can help you de-stress a little bit if and when things become too much. Being able to take a step back and taking a break is also quite healthy at times, and sometimes that's necessary. It's just trying not to lose motivation to go back and keep up with your changes and things like that. That can be really, yeah.
Last thing, lifestyle-wise, what about sleep? The impact of
Yeah.
sleep or lack of sleep on. So there's I sometimes quote that they restricted young men to I think it was 5 hours of sleep for a week, and their testosterone dropped. I think it's over 15%, quite a significant reduction.
Yeah.
I presume we see a similar picture when it comes to sperm counts and things.
Absolutely. Sleep is one of those really difficult things as well, because it's like try to get your, 6 to 8 hours a night, and sometimes that's beyond your control. But there is definitely literature and studies that support that sperm is really sleep is very important for sperm health. But again, similarly, it's for the hormone production, as well as the sperm production. It's not an easy thing to tackle. I think when you're looking at making your lifestyle changes, eating a couple of extra pieces of fruit a day is a little bit easier than like trying to change a sleep habit, if you have difficulty sleeping. If you don't have difficulty sleeping, but you're just not getting enough hours, that's hopefully an easier fix. But sleep can
Yeah,
be one of the harder ones, I think, to try to change. But lack of sleep is known to cause a range of different disorders that can be related to mood, again, to stress and hormone imbalances. So
yeah.
sleep is definitely important. Yeah.
So when you see when someone goes on the Exceed app, they do their sample, and let's
Mhm.
say their total motile sperm comes back as
Mm.
suboptimal.
Yeah.
What way would you go then? Would it be a case of, do you always recheck it as well? That's what I was wondering, is do you always want to make sure that's a reliable sample, like a couple of days later? Repeat it
Um,
first?
that's a good question. So I think when something is suboptimal, there are a couple of different choices. Now, with the kit, they come with multiple slides to use in the
Yeah.
device. You can retest your sperm. There will be certain questions that you answer as well, which can give an indication of, okay, this wasn't great. Maybe retest in a couple of days if you think it wasn't the complete sample, or if there was some other indication that test that day wasn't optimal, maybe not
Yeah.
necessarily the quality of the sperm. However, more commonly, if something is suboptimal, the recommendation is to try again in a couple of months,
Right.
because you want to get that generation of new sperm production. Um,
Yeah.
but it will definitely kind of guide you through both what you know what to do over the next couple of days, but also what to do in terms of trying to make improvements.
Yeah. Yeah. So it kind of guides you. So a couple of months. So the life cycle, is that the life
Mhm.
cycle of a sperm then, is a couple of months? So in terms of wanting to see a significant difference, you're going to have to wait a wee while. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yeah, so what is it? Spermiogenesis itself is about 72 days plus a couple of extra 2 weeks for the maturation process, which can happen both inside the testicles and as they migrate through the epididymis and onwards before ejaculation. So yeah,
Yeah.
roughly 90 days.
Yeah, yeah, fair enough. So you've got to be a bit patient. Yeah. So
You do, which is hard. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, especially if you've got a low result and it's like we were talking about stress before. It's not pleasant if you see this and you think, "Oh my God, I might have a problem here." It's not a nice experience to go through. But at
No.
least with the idea of implementing lifestyle changes, because none of us, even in the space I work with, health optimization,
Yeah.
everybody's, it's there's always something you can change for the positive. And I think at least when you have that ability to make changes, it's always empowering as well. You can see the change as well with the samples, where you can see this was low, and then 3-4 months later, you've got a much better result. And that's actually that nice objective reading to tell you you're doing the right stuff, which is quite nice to see. Yeah.
Exactly. And in addition to that, that kind of feeling can help boost our dopamine levels as well,
Yeah.
which can again just help on that positive trend, because that can always help battle any cortisol levels and any stress that we're experiencing. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So in terms of testosterone, when it comes to TRT and my chap, so just for those listening, when you go on testosterone replacement treatment, what happens basically is your brain stops signaling your testicles to do anything. So you lose the luteinizing hormone and the follicle stimulating hormone, and hence when you go on testosterone, the vast majority of men will have a significant impact on their sperm parameters. Doesn't mean that everybody, when they go on testosterone alone, is going to be infertile. It's not a contraceptive. Otherwise, it might be considered to be used as one, maybe potentially, despite but it's gonna potentially significantly impact your fertility. So that's where the kind of EXSEED link comes in, because when it comes to TRT, there are other injections or treatment modalities that you can use alongside testosterone to try to at least help maintain some testicular functioning. And then when the time comes as well, you can implement what we call a fertility protocol, which involves injecting HCG, which kind of mimics the works on the luteinizing hormone receptor, maybe the FSH receptor. And that sometimes is just enough by itself, HCG, dose variable between individuals. But the other one that you can add in, but it's obviously expensive, is recombinant FSH. So that's basically mimicking the signal from the brains. So then you're kind of completing the circuit. And what I like about EXSEED is the fact that you can monitor the response to these changes. And even when you're just on testosterone, you can check your sperm count to actually see, has it made me potentially infertile at this moment, and do we need to add in things down the line when the time comes for trying for a baby? Or actually, some guys can have 15-20 million of decent sperm when they're on testosterone. Not commonly, but it can happen. So that's where the link with TRT comes in, particularly the monitoring side of it is very useful. Yeah,
Definitely. And I think, anybody who does embark on that TRT kind of treatment pathway has a great opportunity, right, to discuss what might be happening within the body. And then that's where a lot of the guidance and the coaching can come in, of like, well, are you thinking about having children now or in the future? And like, how can you support your sperm health while you're on TRT, or what can you do later when you need to make any changes? Much to your point of the medications that can be taken, monitoring the sperm health is a really, really big one, to just see if changes are happening. Other options can also include potentially freezing sperm before that journey starts, because as you said, you don't really know the impact that it will have on your sperm production until you start taking it. But having a test done beforehand, getting your baseline is kind of a useful way to get into it, right? Just before.
Well, it's another aspect to it is you get the baseline, which indicates, obviously, if you've got low testosterone, the potential, what it implies, or it often implies, is the system already is not working, operationally.
Optimally, yeah.
So there can be a link with already having sperm issues. Now, not always the case. Some guys who pre-TRT have good sperm counts, but sadly, like we said about declining sperm counts, we're commonly seeing younger guys with not great sperm counts. So getting that baseline and potentially getting it frozen as a sort of backup option as well, like a just in case scenario, is very useful. And particularly to the younger guys who haven't completed their family or started their family, getting your sperm count checked, analyzed, plus or minus. Well, I often recommend getting it frozen, basically just in case. But getting that baseline is so useful, because also what it gives you is, if you've got a decent sperm count pre-TRT, you can be almost more confident that if you need to implicate yeah, maybe implicate's the right word, implicate a fertility protocol down the line,
Right.
your system was functioning at the time when you pulled the trigger on TRT. Does that make sense? So you've got that baseline confidence almost that things were working. We know
Yeah.
TRT is going to impact it, but then when you add in the other injections, then you've got a system that can respond more likely, let's say.
And can recover any potential decline that you had on TRT.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
lifestyle stuff still counts, though. It's like when someone goes on
Absolutely.
TRT, you've still got
Yeah,
to be ticking the healthy lifestyle as well. You can't
of course.
expect the testosterone to do everything, but rightly so with the fertility protocol, you can't expect it to do everything. You've still got to be looking at the lifestyle and sleep and stress and everything like that. Yeah.
Of course. Absolutely. No, it is really important because and you know this better than I do, but some men can also have certain side effects when on TRT, or at least maybe in the beginning when things are starting to like level out, and that's where those healthy habits and especially with exercise can really come into play and be beneficial, because that can really help you adjust and help your body like get into it once you kind of
Massively.
find your right dosage and your right level, and then it can really be helpful when trying to get used to that new medication.
Massively so. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. The lifestyle is so important for how well your body responds to the treatment. There's so many factors that go into that, including largely its inflammation, essentially. So
Yeah.
if there's an inflammatory state, that affects how our body processes that testosterone, essentially.
Yeah.
Gets a bit complicated in terms of how it gets broken down into X, Y, or Z, but it's on a basic level, it's oxidative stress. Inflammation causes inappropriate conversions, let's say. So have you got anything else that you can think to add today? Because I know I'm aware I've got get taken up about 45 minutes of your time, so you've probably got other things to do today. Yeah.
So other things that we haven't mentioned that I think also have an impact on testicular health and function would be temperature, testicular temperature,
Mm.
and things like that. And again, very much linked to testosterone levels and sperm production. And so we know that the testicles need to be at least 2 degrees cooler than the body temperature. And so things to consider there. EXSEED is, from a Scandinavian country where people like to be in saunas and things
Mhm.
like that. So it's like, maybe reduce that a little bit, reduce the number of hot baths, and even, tight fitting underwear, boxers, things like that, and to ensure that you've got the optimal environment for the production as
Mhm.
well, and not just you know what you're doing in terms of your diet and nutrition.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that was one of them. What else have we forgotten?
Structural issues. I suppose the other thing is considering whether there's a structural issue going on within the testicles.
Yeah,
Getting
varicoceles or
yeah,
obstructions and
yeah,
things like that. Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And getting blood work potentially done alongside. So if you're not going through the Alphagenix route with the TRT assessment, which
Mm,
incorporates the bloods that you generally need to look at fertility as well, but from a
yeah.
blood work standpoint. But I suppose it can be helpful for those guys who are going down the EXSEED route and they do
Mm,
have a low sperm count, maybe potentially get blood work done to look at things like your hormonal health, even things like thyroid, like you're talking
yeah.
about, anemia, chronic kidney disease, all of these things that can lead to fertility issues as well. So it's sometimes useful to consider actual blood work alongside the sperm testing.
Definitely, definitely, yeah. And I guess also important just to acknowledge that, if you're kind of not sure if you fit into this category yet, and I think we talked about this a little bit offline before we started, is, you know, you might need to help guide your healthcare practitioner. If you're not able to access experts like Dr. Max here, then you might have to guide them if you have any of the symptoms that can relate to low testosterone levels, because this is something that often gets misdiagnosed as mental health issues. So things like low confidence and low energy, insomnia can also be like a common I guess, symptom when you're experiencing low testosterone. Again, sleep is very important, but it can be hard to battle that with this as a common side effect. And so low libido, of course, is one of the main classified symptoms. And if you have any of these, to help push, for testing and treatment.
And just to add to that, just because if you do get a total testosterone done with your doctor, that is not enough for an analysis of what's going on. Plus, if it's come back in the so-called normal range, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily normal. That's important for guys listening. We always got to re-hit that process here as well. Yeah, we often get guys who've had low levels to the trained people, but being told that it was normal, which is obviously rather frustrating. Yeah.
It is. It can be a really difficult space to navigate, where you're often having to push and advocate for yourself to get the help that you need. But
well, it can be confusing as well if you get told two different things from two different doctors as well. I appreciate that as well, because someone can but they said it was normal. It's like, it's not normal. But that in itself is like being pulled two directions, which again come back to that stress idea. It's not always easy with the stress side of things. But yeah, that was really helpful. I think we've covered most of it, Sandy, I think, to be honest there. I think you've done a good job, I think, of explaining how it works, lifestyle changes to implement. Yeah.
Excellent. And testing at home with EXSEED is great. And just to plug again, we mentioned the nutritional supplements that can be beneficial for sperm health and sperm production. That is also something that EXSEED have.
And it's all linked on the app, isn't it? Where you can click on the links to the supplement list. You can click on the link to the nutritional and lifestyle advice. All of it's kind of quite nicely laid out. I sound like I'm trying to sell it, but I just quite liked it when I used it. Yeah. How do people find, how do people find you, the EXSEED and everything like that? How do people look up where to get all of this stuff?
Great question. So I think we've got a page on your website on Alphagenix. Obviously, we've got our own details on EXSEEDhealth.com, and we've got Instagram. Follow us on Instagram.
Brilliant. Well, Sandy Christiansen, thank you very much for joining us. It's been very useful.
Thank you, Max. Thank you for having me today.
Pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.